Acharya Astotara Sata Sri Srimad His Divine Grace of Charanara Vinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Shri Shri Kodan Nitai Maya Poshashi Ki Jai. Yatai Gaura Pramandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today is the appearance day of Sri Gadadhara Pandit. So Sri Gadadhara Pandit of the Panchatattva, Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara, Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai. Srimati Radharani, who is the personification of pure love for Sri Krishna and who is the Queen of Vrindavan, appeared as Sri Gadadhara Pandit, who was very dear to Lord Chaitanya. Lalita Sakhi always follows Srimati Radhika, and therefore Lalita's second name is Anuradha, one who follows Radha. When Srimati Radhika appeared as Gadadhara Pandit, Lalita followed her, entering the body of Gadadhara. Therefore, Gadadhara Pandit is the incarnation of both Srimati Radharani and Lalita Sakhi. These two are the transcendental potencies of Lord Krishna. Since the Lord, in one sense, is not different from his potencies, it may be said that Lord Sri Krishna is present wherever his potencies go. For this reason, it may be said that Lord Hari is also present in the body of Gadadhara Pandit. Gadadhara, therefore, is the incarnation of three persons: Srimati Radharani, Lalita Sakhi, and Lord Hari. Gadadhara Pandit is celebrated all over the world for his gentle behavior, his Brahminical attributes, and his steady love for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sri Gadadhara Pandit appeared a year after Lord Chaitanya. Gadai and Nimai were inseparable as childhood playmates. Later, Gadadhara Pandit also took the renounced order of life and went to Jagannath Puri to be with Lord Chaitanya. Accepting Kshetra Sannyas, a renunciate who never leaves the Dham, he served the deity of Tota Gopinath with full love and devotion. When Gadadhara Pandit became old and couldn't stretch his arms to offer a garland to his deity, Tota Gopinath sat down to facilitate Gadadhara Pandit's loving service. Has anyone here been to see Tota Gopinath? You've seen him. When Lord Chaitanya disappeared, one of the places that he was said to have, he was seen in three places simultaneously at the time that he departed from the world. One was on the ocean, on the shore of the ocean. One was entering onto the altar of Jagannath, and the other place was in the temple of Tota Gopinath. And there's a little crack on the knee of the deity of Tota Gopinath, and it's said that Lord Chaitanya entered into the form of Tota Gopinath, and he entered in through that crack. So he was very fond of Gadadhara Pandit. And when Gadadhara Pandit took Kshetra Sannyas so that he could be with Lord Chaitanya, so Lord Chaitanya made Puri his headquarters, and so Gadadhara Pandit followed him to Jagannath Puri and took this vow of Kshetra Sannyas so that he could always be with Lord Chaitanya in the holy Dham of Jagannath Puri. And then when Lord Chaitanya went to travel to South India, went on his travels for, 6 years? 6 years he was travelling. Gadadhara Pandit went to follow him, and Lord Chaitanya forbade him from going because he said, "You've taken this vow of Kshetra Sannyas, you can't leave the holy Dham." And Gadadhara Pandit said, "Well, the reason I took this vow was to be with you. So now, to hell with the vow, let me just be with you and follow you." And Lord Chaitanya absolutely forbade him from leaving Puri, and Gadadhara Pandit fainted in the ecstasy of separation from Lord Chaitanya. And there's a really sweet pastime of after Lord Chaitanya's disappearance. This is going to collapse. We really need a new microphone stand. After Lord Chaitanya's disappearance, then the next generation of devotees who came after Lord Chaitanya to sort of continue the mission of Lord Chaitanya, then three of the most prominent personalities were Srinivasacharya, Narottam Das Thakur, and Shyamananda Pandit. And these three became the original Sankirtan, travelling Sankirtan party. They travelled throughout India to arrange for the books of the Goswamis to be broadcast, because up until that time, the books that the Goswamis had written, they were just located in Vrindavan. So outside of Vrindavan, very few people knew of these books and teachings and revelations that the Goswamis of Vrindavan were presenting in their books. So there was this arrangement made by Srila Jiva Goswami that these three personalities, Srinivas Acharya, Narottam Das Thakur, and Sri Shyamananda Prabhu, they would travel to Bengal and Orissa and throughout India to distribute these teachings of Lord Chaitanya as sort of presented in the books of the Goswamis. So before Srinivas Acharya arrived in Vrindavan to study under Jiva Goswami, he first of all travelled to Jagannath Puri. And he travelled there to be with Lord Chaitanya, because he began his journey before Lord Chaitanya had disappeared, when he was a young man, when Srinivas was a young man. But then when he arrived and on his way to Jagannath Puri, he heard that Lord Chaitanya had disappeared. And when he arrived in Jagannath Puri, everyone was really, if you read the books that describe it, it would say that they were drowning in the ecstasy of separation from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Srinivas Acharya, he was devastated, but then he went to see Gadadhara Pandit at the temple of Tota Gopinath, and Gadadhara Pandit was inconsolable. But when Srinivas Acharya arrived, Gadadhara Pandit's mood lifted a little, because he said actually Lord Chaitanya appeared to him. It said on the pretext of a dream. There's this expression which appears in these descriptions of the lives of the Vaishnavas, that's on the pretext of a dream. So it means that it's what we would maybe term a dream, but the actual reality is that it's a spiritual revelation. The Lord appears while the devotee appears to be resting and gives this revelation and appears before them. So on the pretext of a dream, Lord Chaitanya had appeared to Gadadhara Pandit and told him that this personality, Srinivas Acharya, will soon arrive in Jagannath Puri, and I want you to teach him the Srimad Bhagavatam. I want you to instruct him the Srimad Bhagavatam. So when Srinivas Acharya arrived, Gadadhara was happy that at least he could do some service for Lord Chaitanya, and at least he could sort of fulfill Lord Chaitanya's desire. So he welcomed Srinivas Acharya, but then when he went to get the Srimad Bhagavatam was illegible. It couldn't be read, because because Lord Chaitanya had personally given this copy of the Srimad Bhagavatam to Gadadhara Pandit, but Lord Chaitanya's tears of love for Krishna and tears of separation for Krishna had moistened the pages and had made the words on the page unreadable, and then that also mixed with the tears of Gadadhara Pandit. So this Bhagavatam was unreadable because of the tears of separation of Lord Chaitanya and Gadadhara. So Srinivas Acharya, he took the Bhagavatam and he placed it to his head, and as soon as he touched the Bhagavatam to his head, he just went into ecstasy. And then Gadadhara said to him, you go and you acquire another copy of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's not like now we just nip down to the warehouse and get a Bhagavatam set. The books weren't, you couldn't just go and buy a Bhagavatam. They had to be copied by hand. When someone required one, then it would be written out by hand, and they weren't easy to get hold of in the same way that they are now. We see also even a couple of hundred years ago, Bhaktivinoda Thakur really struggled to get hold of a copy of Chaitanya Charitamrita. It took him a long time to acquire a copy. So we're very blessed, spoiled in fact, that we have all these books just readily available, and sometimes we take it for granted, but actually it's a real blessing that we have access to so much transcendental literature so easily. And so Srinivas Acharya, he left Jagannath Puri to go to acquire a copy of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and finally he managed to get one, and he came back to Jagannath Puri. But when he came back, he found that a few days earlier Gadadhara Pandit had disappeared from the world, He could no longer remain in the world in separation from Lord Chaitanya. So the question arises that, Lord Chaitanya specifically asked Gadadhara Pandit to teach the Srimad Bhagavatam to Srinivasacharya. So since he had given that instruction directly to Gadadhara, why is it that Gadadhara didn't remain to fulfill that instruction? But actually, he did fulfill that instruction, because he taught Srinivasacharya by his own personal example the highest mood of worshipping the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam was so moistened with the tears of love of separation of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Gadadhara Pandit, and that in itself was the lesson, that was the message, that was the instruction, that was the teaching of Gadadhara Pandit, that this mood of love and separation. Gadadhara Pandit actually, he used to recite the Bhagavatam continuously. He was always reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's said that when he spoke the Bhagavatam, it was like, it describes it, compares him to a particular type of bird. I can't remember, but his recitation was so sweet. Do you remember, Chabot? His recitation was so sweet that it sounded like a songbird singing. And he could sing every single verse of the Bhagavatam in a number of different meters. He could recite it in so many different tunes and melodies and meters. And that was his service for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, was to recite the Bhagavatam, to speak the Bhagavatam for the pleasure of Lord Chaitanya. And then in separation from Lord Chaitanya and in separation from Lord Krishna, then the pages of the Bhagavatam were moistened with the tears of love of separation. And this was the highest teaching. The detail of actually teaching the structure and the grammar and the verses and the purport of the Bhagavatam, that was left to Srila Jiva Goswami. Jiva Goswami, he did that on behalf of the Lord for Srinivas and Narottam and Shyamananda. But the actual personal living example was taught by Gadadhara Pandit, this mood of love for Lord Chaitanya and separation from Krishna and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this was taught by Gadadhara Pandit. So we can pray to Gadadhara Pandit that we can not only understand the grammar and the verses and the purport of the Bhagavatam, but that we can actually develop the mood of how to actually live the message of the Bhagavatam, and how to really understand the real deep mood and purport of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So Sri Gadadhara Pandit Ki Jai. So we'll read from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th canto, chapter 12. Rahugana converses with Jad Bharat, texts 5 to 6. We won't do call and response because it's a little late and it's a very long verse. Brahmana uvacha ayam jano namachalam pritivyam ya partiva kasya heto tasyapi changuriyo adigulpa janga Januru Matuyoro Shiro Dharamsa Amse Didavi Sibika Chayasmam Sovira Rajetya Padesha Aste Yasmin Bhavan Rudha Nijabimano Rajasmi Sindhu Shveti Durmadanda. Translation. The self-realized Brahman Jad Bharat said, among the various material combinations and permutations, there are various forms and earthly transformations. For some reason, these move on the surface of the earth and are called palanquin carriers. Those material transformations which do not move are gross material objects like stones. In any case, the material body is made of earth and stone in the form of feet, ankles, calves, knees, thighs, torso, throat, and head. Upon the shoulders is the wooden palanquin, and within the palanquin is the so-called king of Suvira. The body of the king is simply another transformation of earth, but within that body, your lordship is situated and falsely thinking that you are the king of the state of Suvira. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. After analysing the material bodies of the palanquin carrier and the palanquin passenger, Jad Bharat concludes that the real living force is the living entity. The living entity is the offshoot or offspring of Lord Vishnu. Therefore, within this material world, among moving and non-moving things, the real principle is Lord Vishnu. Due to his presence, everything is working, and there are actions and reactions. One who understands Lord Vishnu as the original cause of everything is to be understood to be perfectly situated in knowledge. Although he was falsely proud of being a king, King Rahugana was not really situated in knowledge. Therefore, he was rebuking the palanquin carriers, including the self-realized Brahman Jad Bharat. This is the first accusation Jad Bharat made against the king, who was daring to talk to a learned Brahman from the flimsy ground of ignorance, identifying everything with matter. King Rahugana argued that the living entity is within the body, and that when the body is fatigued, the living entity within must therefore be suffering. It is clearly explained in the following verses that the living entity does not suffer due to the body's fatigue. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti gives an example of a child heavily decorated with ornaments. Although the child's body is very delicate, he does not feel fatigue, nor do the parents think that his ornaments should be taken away. The living entity has nothing to do with bodily pains and pleasures. These are simply mental concoctions. An intelligent man will find the original cause of everything. Material combinations and permutations may be a matter of fact in worldly dealings, but actually the living force, the soul, has nothing to do with them. Those who are materially upset take care of the body and manufacture Daridra and Narayan, poor Narayan. However, it is not a fact that the soul or supersoul becomes poor simply because the body is poor. These are the statements of ignorant people. The soul and supersoul are always apart from bodily pleasure and pain. Om Jnana Timidandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshuram Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Padajana Sahitam Sri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakam Vitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Pastichadesha Tarane Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Excuse me. The self-realized Brahman Jad Bharat said, among the various material combinations and permutations, there are various forms and earthly transformations. For some reason, these move on the surface of the earth and are called palanquin carriers. Those material transformations which do not move are gross material objects like stones. In any case, the material body is made of earth and stone in the form of feet, ankles, calves, knees, thighs, torso, throat, and head. Upon the shoulders is the wooden palanquin, and within the palanquin is the so-called king of Suvira. The body of the king is simply another transformation of earth, but within that body, your lordship is situated, and falsely thinking that you are the king of the state of Suvira. This really reminds me, hopefully appropriately, of this little anecdote which we're all very familiar with, but it's always worth hearing it again and again, where Srila Prabhupada was speaking with his very beloved disciple, Srila Tamal Krishna Maharaj. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj was a very expert manager, leader, organizer, and in the eyes of some devotees, he was sometimes quite overbearing in his sort of mood and personality. He had a very, very strong and sometimes quite overwhelming personality, that he could see often that there was a certain way of doing things, and as the sort of as the leader and manager that he was, then there was no other way to do things other than that way. So he could be quite kind of forceful in how he presented it. And Srila Prabhupada was speaking with him once, and Srila Prabhupada said that, there is Mahavishnu, and from the body of Mahavishnu, from the skin pores, from the practically unlimited skin pores in the body of Mahavishnu, almost unlimited material universes are emanating from the holes in the skin of Mahavishnu. And in each one of those universes, there's unlimited material universes, and amongst all these unlimited material universes, there's one material universe. And in that one material universe, there are hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of planets, material planets within that universe. And out of those many, 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 many thousands of planets, there's one planet called Earth. And in that one planet called Earth, there are many continents and countries. And out of all those many continents and countries, there's one country, the United States of America. And in the United States of America, there's many, many states. And out of those many, many states, there is one state, California. And in that one state of California, there are many, 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 many cities. And out of those many cities, there is one city, Los Angeles. And in that city of Los Angeles, there are many suburbs of Los Angeles, and there are many streets in Los Angeles. And out of those many, 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 many hundreds and thousands of streets and avenues and suburbs, there is one street, Watsaker Avenue. And in that one street, Watsaker Avenue, there are hundreds and thousands, actually, of houses on that particular street. And out of those thousands of houses, there is one house. And that one house has been bought by the International Society for Krishna Consciousness and has been converted into a temple. And in that one house, there are many, many, many rooms. And out of those many rooms, there is one room. And in that one room, there is one Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And he is thinking that he is the supreme personality of Godhead, and that he is the controller of everything, Tamal Krishna Maharaj used to love telling this story, so he certainly kind of took this instruction in the right mood and in the right spirit. But it's a fact that here we are, tiny little living entities, utterly overwhelmed by the misconception of thinking that I am the body, I am the mind, and I am the Lord of all that I survey. And so sometimes, are there some tissues? Could I get a tissue? I can either make one horrible sound blowing my nose and get it all over and done with, or I can spend the entire remainder of the class sniffling and snorting and putting everyone off their breakfast. So, we're overwhelmed with this misconception, and depending, it's a nice. Obviously, someone like this king of Suvera, King Rahugana, we can probably take. We don't know much about him. What we know is this one pastime which takes place in the Srimad Bhagavatam, where the king is there. He's on in palanquin. He appears on the scene. He enlists the service of Jad Bharat, and then this whole incident takes place where Jad Bharat is avoiding the ants on the path, and so he's moving in an unusual way. This is causing the palanquin to move in an uncomfortable way for the king, and so the king chastises Jad Bharat, and then Jad Bharat starts instructing the king and reveals to the king his true nature and his true identity as a highly realized personality. So this is all we really learn about the king of King Rahugana. But we can probably take it that he's not an absolutely uncultured person. He's a king. This pastime is taking place during a period in history where the Vedic culture is much more prominent and much more prevalent throughout the world. So we can take it that this is a fairly cultured person, but somehow or other he doesn't have the vision, the spiritual vision, or even vision in general to be able to appreciate the character of Jad Bharat, and even necessarily have the sort of humility which is really required of all realized souls. Like Lord Chaitanya teaches Trinadapi Sunichena Tarorapi Sahishnuna Amanina Manadina Kirtaniya Sadahari. And, generally speaking, we speak this verse. Thank you. Generally, we sort of speak this verse in the context of offering our obeisances to the devotees. Thank you. I'll just try and make it quick. Excuse me. Apologies. And it's a fact. This verse is a prayer of obeisance and respect to the Vaishnavas. Vaishnava ABO, what is it? Anyway, it's offering obeisances to the Vaishnavas. But then at the end we hear, should be ready to offer all respects unto others, unto all others. Not just all devotees, but offer respects unto all others. So the mood of respectfulness to all living entities is the mood of a Vaishnava. It's not that we're only respectful to Vaishnavas and then everyone else is just some, as some more fanatical people may say, meat-eating kami demons or something like this. They're all just completely out of it and they're not worthy of any respect. But actually, the philosophy which we're taught is that all living entities are the abode of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord is situated in the heart of all living entities, and therefore a Vaishnava offers respects to everyone. Now, how they go about offering that respect, that's another thing. How they offer that respect, how they manifest that respect, that requires discrimination. Even amongst Vaishnavas, we show discrimination in how we show our respect. Rupa Goswami teaches that one should, one should mentally honor the devotee who chants the holy name of Lord Krishna. One should offer humble obeisances to the devotee who has undergone spiritual initiation, diksha, and is engaged in worshipping the deity. And one should associate with and faithfully serve that pure devotee who is advanced in undeviated devotional service and whose heart is completely devoid of the propensity to criticize others. So even amongst devotees, we don't necessarily manifest respect in the same way with everyone. We manifest that respect differently. Always respect is there within the heart, but how we manifest it, how we show it, may be different depending on who we're dealing with. So obviously the same goes for those who are not necessarily on the devotional path, who are following lifestyle choices which are very, very unfavorable to devotional service, and also which are very unfavorable in the sense of taking their association. We don't want to take association from people because we develop the qualities of the people we associate with. So we're careful who we associate with. But still, we're respectful, we are gentle, we are kind. We try to develop these qualities. But, somehow or other, this King Rahugana, despite perhaps having certain culture, wasn't able to manifest this mood of respect, and also wasn't able to appreciate Jad Bharat's position until Jad Bharat started speaking. And that's also another whole subject, because a person's nature is revealed by how they speak. I think Srila Prabhupada says in the Bhagavad Gita that a fool remains hidden until he speaks. So we can look like a Brahmana, we can have all the, we know how to wrap our chadar in the right way, and we have all the, we've got all the different types of beads around our neck, and we've got the, things tied around our arms, and we've got all the trinkets and all the, we've got all the different paraphernalia. We look the part. But then when we speak, what comes out of our mouth may not necessarily reveal us to be the sort of learned, cultured person who we're trying to present ourselves as. And then from the other side, we see a personality like Jad Bharat externally didn't look the part. If we saw this person, maybe even if this person walked into our own temple room, we would say, oh, please go out, take a bath, come back later at darshan time or something like this. We may not have the eyes to appreciate because of the external appearance. That isn't to say that we shouldn't take care of our external appearance. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't take care of our external body. But the point is that what's going on externally is not necessarily an indication of what's internal. It's not necessarily the case. And so we should be cautious, because you never know who you're dealing with. You never know who you're dealing with. And so, because this King Rahugana sort of revealed through his behavior and through his speech that he didn't have the culture or the vision to be able to not only appreciate Jad Bharat, because Jad Bharat wasn't looking for appreciation or respect, but he also just maybe didn't have the qualifications which really a king in his position should have. Evam parampara praptam imam raja seyovidu. That the science is coming down through disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. And because the succession was broken, therefore Krishna speaks it again to Arjuna, a king. So the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita, although meant for everyone, is meant to be disseminated and organized throughout society by the saintly kings. And this is one of the reasons why, because if we look at the story of the Mahabharata, Duryodhana was actually doing a good job of organizing the kingdom. He was actually doing a good job. He had organized the kingdom nicely. He was taxing the citizens in the proper way. Externally he was doing everything nicely, but he was antagonistic to the devotees and to the teachings of Lord Krishna. Whereas Yudhisthira Maharaj, Krishna wanted Yudhisthira Maharaj to be the ruler, not just because he had the material skills of a king, but because he was a saintly king. And this was why the Bhagavad Gita was spoken once again to Arjuna, and then obviously in time to all of the Pandavas and the rulers. Because as a king is not supposed to just have the material skills to be able to manage and organize and administrate. But Krishna's intention for the rulers is that they organize, administer, and govern according to saintly principles, according to the principles of the Bhagavad Gita. So somehow this king didn't have this spiritual vision. And so we see, just like Krishna, when he starts to instruct Arjuna, the situation is a little different, although we don't even know whether the situation is a little different. Prabhupada doesn't comment on it here. It could be that King Rahugana, just like Arjuna, is covered temporarily so that it gives the opportunity for Jad Bharat to speak knowledge, which will then be broadcast to the world, just as Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Arjuna was placed into ignorance by Krishna. He was put into that situation by Krishna. He became bewildered. Previous to the battle of Kurukshetra, on the final day of the Pandavas' exile, during the last year of the Pandavas' exile, the arrangement was that they had to spend, I think it was 12 years in exile, and then the 13th year they had to live incognito. They had to basically disappear for a year and not be found or detected. And if during that final year they were discovered, then they had to begin the exile all over again. So in the final year, they took shelter in the kingdom of Kirata, I think. Is that right? Virata. The kingdom of Virata. The king Virata and his kingdom, which was also Virata. So they took shelter there, and they all took on different disguises. Yudhisthira took on the role of a Brahmin who became an advisor to the king. And interesting, while he was there, he also learned the art of playing dice. So this way the Kauravas couldn't trick him again with the same thing. He learned the skill that he became as skilled a dice player as Shakuni, who was the person who tricked them in the first place. Bhima became a cook. Nakula and Sahadev, one of them became a cowherd man and the other looked after the horses. I can't remember which was which. And then Arjuna became a eunuch who taught the dancing girls. And that was a whole interesting story as well, because previous to this, he had gone to the heavenly planets. And while he was in the heavenly planets, there was a pastime which took place that one of the heavenly damsels, she became offended because Arjuna wouldn't submit to her affections. So she cursed Arjuna that he would lose his manhood for 1 year. And he was quite disturbed about it, but he went to see Indra. Indra is his father. And Indra said, don't worry, it's all an arrangement. You're going to need it later on. And then later on, he was able to sort of take on the role of a eunuch. And then in the very last day of the exile, when the exile was actually officially ended, the Kauravas thought that they had tracked them down to this kingdom. And so they attacked the kingdom. And Arjuna, he helped the prince of Virata, the son of the king, to overpower all the army of the Kauravas single-handedly. He personally defeated them all. It's a wonderful chapter. It's one of my favorite chapters in the Mahabharata. He single-handedly defeated all of the Kauravas. He defeated Bhima. He didn't kill any of them. But he defeated them and he drove them away on his own. So he'd already defeated them. And then here on the Battle of Kurukshetra, he became overwhelmed with not just compassion, but Prabhupada describes fear, and so many different emotions are there. So Arjuna had the ability, he had the skill, he had everything that was required to defeat them. But Krishna put him into this difficult situation so that he could speak the Bhagavad Gita. Maybe the same is true for King Rahugana. We don't know, because we just know this one isolated pastime. But regardless, Jad Bharat here takes a similar sort of approach to Krishna when he's speaking the Bhagavad Gita, because if we look at this verse, it's pretty cutting. The language that Jad Bharat uses is quite sarcastic and quite cutting. You are, among the various material combinations and permutations, there are various forms and earthly transformations. For some reason, these move on the surface of the earth and are called palanquin carriers. Those material transformations which do not move are gross material objects like stones. In any case, the material body is made of earth and stone in the form of feet, ankles, calves, knees, thighs, torso, throat, and head. Upon the shoulders is the wooden palanquin, and within the palanquin is the so-called king of Suvira. The body of the king is simply another transformation of earth, but within that body your lordship is situated and falsely thinking that you are the king of the state of Suvira. It's pretty sharp. He's cutting through the king's ego so that he can actually reveal transcendental knowledge. It's quite... So this is, sometimes this is how kindness and even respectfulness is shown. Jad Bharat, out of compassion, really wants the king to understand his true nature. But as a realized soul, He's aware of what is the best way to go about doing that. He's dealing with a king. He's not just dealing with anyone. It's not that we should treat anyone with sarcasm and cutting remarks. But a king has a certain ego. A king has a certain nature. Ishwara Bhav. And sometimes that sort of controlling nature overwhelms the mind of a king. And so they become bewildered, thinking that they are the most important. But actually the king is meant to be the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Once again, this is why Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita. The king is not just meant to be a king, but a king is meant to be a saintly king. A king is meant to be like the father of the citizens. He represents God. It was interesting. I listened to a class by Srila Radhanath Swami Maharaj. He was speaking about his sort of system of devotee care and counselor system. It was recorded quite a long time ago, probably at least 10 years ago, maybe more. And he was giving the example of his own personal experiences being in New Vrindavan, which is a large sort of devotee temple community in North America. And he said that the sort of mood that prevailed that community at that time, this is a long time ago, must be at least 30 years ago now. Yeah, 30 years ago, late 80s, early 90s. He said that the mood that prevailed was that they were really working very, very hard to sort of build. There was a lot of building, construction, temple maintenance, temple development, these kind of things. That was basically the thrust of the community, raising money and building the temple. Everything was sort of centered around that. And the devotees were working extremely hard, long hours, physical work. It was just hard work, day in, day out, hard work. And the mood of the mood of the sort of leaders at that time was that if the devotees work hard for Krishna, then Krishna will look after the devotees. Krishna will look after them. Because they are surrendering, because they're working so hard, Krishna will look after them. But he said still, despite the fact that they were working so hard for Krishna, some devotees, quite a few devotees, really had personal difficulties, and some even left. So he had to ask himself, well, if Krishna is going to look after the devotees, why didn't Krishna look after the devotees? And his realization was that actually the leaders, they are supposed to act on behalf of Krishna to look after the devotees. They don't just leave it to Krishna to do it himself, but actually the leaders, the kings, the leaders, the managers, the governors, the organizers, the politicians, the administrators, the kshatriyas, they are acting on behalf of Krishna. They have to become saintly rulers, saintly kings. They look after their subjects on behalf of Krishna. They become like caring parents who care for their subjects and care for the people under their care as their own children. Even to the point where we even sometimes see examples in Shastra of kings who rejected their own personal biological children in favor of people within their kingdom. That's not to say we should do that necessarily, but Shastra sometimes gives very extreme examples just to emphasize a point. So this is the responsibility of the kings, and in order to be able to fulfill that responsibility, the kings need to be self-realized, saintly rulers. They need to be living themselves according to the principles of Shastra, because they can't teach and govern according to those principles unless they themselves are living and manifesting those principles. So the first responsibility of a ruler is that they themselves are surrendered, self-realized souls, or if not self-realized, at least aspiring seriously to attain that position through studying, through hearing, through chanting, through bhakti, through devotional service. Devotional service hearing, chanting, remembering, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, worshipping the lotus feet, Archanam, worshipping the deity, Vandanam, offering prayers, Sakyam, becoming friends with the Lord, Dasyam, becoming the servant of the Lord, Atmanivedanam. These are the processes of bhakti. So whatever we're doing, the hard work that we're doing and the managing that we're doing and the cooking that we're doing and the cleaning that we're doing, it becomes bhakti when it is accompanied by these 9 processes. When it is accompanied with hearing and chanting and remembering and serving and praying and so on and so forth. So Jad Bharat is instructing the king quite strongly so that he can cut through that ego, so that he can actually give the king good instruction, so the king can then go on to make all of the people within his in his kingdom also saintly devotees of the Lord. One should not become a father or a teacher or a king unless he can deliver his subjects. So we'll stop there. It's past. If anyone online has any comments or questions, then please share them. And if anyone in the temple room has any comments or corrections, then please share them. Anything? Anything online? No? Okay. So we'll stop there. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Gadadhara Pandit Goswami ki jai. Shri Shri Kodanitai Mayapushashi ki jai. Nitai Gaura Premanandi Hari Bol.